Stories are the language of the soul. They have a way of penetrating the heart in a way few other influences can. This is why Jesus used storytelling so often to illustrate deeper truths. He knew the power of a story to cut through to the heart. These now famous stories are known as parables. They were Jesus' way to communicate an important kingdom principle in a form that we could remember and that would meet us where we are at. Although the details of these stories were fictitious, the kingdom principles are not. Today, they continue to remind us who God is and what He calls us to be a part of and how much He loves us.
Well, it's Holy Wednesday and Jesus is in a storytelling mood. You know, Jesus told dozens of parables, but as we said, if you know it's your last week to live, Jesus knows it's his last week. He saves his last 3 parables that he shared while he was alive on Wednesday. The first one, and it's all about the end times. It's all about the end times. In fact, he talks about what the end times will be like, but then he says, don't guess when the end times are going to happen because he doesn't even know. His Father is the only one that knows. But then on that, then he shares his last 3 parables found in Matthew 25. The first one is about being ready for Christ's return. To be ready, because no one knows when it will happen, so we are to be ready. In the second parable, he talks about while we're waiting, be about our Father's business. Invest the gifts and the talents that God has given us in this world. And then the last one he shares before his death might be the most dramatic parable he ever shared. He says, friends, when the Son of Man comes in all his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And all the nations, there's a theme here, all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Wow. He's got to have people's attention right here. This is powerful, important, riveting. All the nations are gathered before Jesus. I try to picture the diversity of the massive crowds, people of every culture, tribe, language, and color, humanity crammed all together. So many that they disappear over the horizon. Picture this. It's final judgment day. My heart's beating fast on this one. I'm on pins and needles. A cold sweat is permeating my skin. What kind of criteria is he going to use to separate the sheep from the goats? What is it? Will it be church attendance, tithing, righteousness, correct theology, abstaining from evil, the correct political party, the correct religious affiliation? This is it, friends. His last parable. And he's saying, when the final judgment comes, I'm going to separate. There's no going back. I bet you the people's ears were ringing as they try to listen. What's it going to be? And will they pass the test? So Jesus continues. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. This inheritance has been prepared for you since the creation of the world. He says, come, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came and visited me. The people have to be thinking, I'm thinking, really? My inheritance, his kingdom, they've been prepared for me since the creation of the world, and it has to do with my care for Jesus when he was hungry and thirsty, needing shelter or clothing, when he was sick or in prison. I mean, people's minds had to be blown. I mean, when I was growing up in church, I was told I would pass the test by staying away from evil people and not doing bad things. But wait. First of all, I didn't know Jesus needed these things. Second of all, I've never really met Jesus physically, I mean. I've committed my heart to him, I've prayed to him, I've asked for his guidance and forgiveness, but he's never appeared to me in physical form, so I'm not sure I qualify for this inheritance that he talks about. I'm not sure I passed the test. And then he clarifies what he means to a confused crowd, to a confused me, as he says, then the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry? When did we see you thirsty? When? When did we see you a stranger? When did we see you naked? When did we see you sick or in prison? And Jesus will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, they're his brothers and sisters. Whenever you did something to the least of these, you did for me. And I think people were blown away. I'm blown away. I have to remind myself all the time. You mean to tell me Jesus has been physically all around me my entire life, and they are my brothers and sisters who are struggling. They are my brothers and sisters who've been forgotten, judged, gone down some wayward paths, who've been marginalized. Well, that means I've had opportunities virtually every day of my life to meet and serve and hang out with Jesus. Again, I was taught I might meet Jesus through a really cool church service or a worship song or a well-written book or when I send my money to a TV preacher with fancy suits and big teeth. But even then, it was more theory than reality, more fiction than fact. To be honest, it seemed the more I tried to find Jesus with one more sermon or one more song, in many ways he seemed to get further away. I know people like this. They're sincere. They want to meet Jesus. They want to be close to Jesus. And they do all types of things to try to get to him. But the truth is, how exciting is this? Jesus is all around us. He is near us. And we have the opportunity to be with him intimately every day. I have an opportunity to live in his kingdom. I just need to remember where I meet Jesus. I need to remember the answer to the test. Where is Jesus? How do we meet him? He's the homeless man looking for shelter. She's the abused mom looking for safety. They are the homeless teenagers needing the dignity of new clothing and school supplies as they get ready for another semester. He's the leper looking for someone to care. She's the prostitute begging for intimacy. He's your coworker who's deeply depressed. She's the mother of 3 in a Syrian refugee camp wondering if she is going to be able to keep her children safe. She's the forgotten widow barely getting by on her Social Security check driving through to get food at a local food bank. He's your neighbor facing bankruptcy and losing his home. She's the elementary student abandoned by her father. He's the drug addict looking for another fix. She's the foreigner facing another day of prejudice. And she's the recovering mother trying to learn new life skills to change the legacy of her family. These are Jesus' brothers and sisters. And so they are your and my brothers and sisters. As Tony Campolo implores people of faith, Jesus never says to the poor, come find the church, but he says to those of us in the church to go into the world and find the poor, the hungry, the homeless, the imprisoned. For this, Jesus said, not me, Jesus said, this is where we get our inheritance. This is where we discover it. This is what it means to live in God's kingdoms. This is where you meet Jesus. This is where you pass the test. I was speaking one Sunday, and over to my right, in the middle of my message, there was an elderly lady sitting in a row all by herself, prim and proper. Just prim and proper. She looked like she had come to worship God. She was just, a saint. And she's sitting there. About halfway through my sermon, a disheveled young man walks through the door. and sits in her row about 4 seats from him. He's bloody. He's been beaten up. He reeks of alcohol. He has slept in the bushes the night before after getting beat up at a bar fight, and he sits 4 seats from her. You couldn't have 2 different people. And you know what this elderly lady did? She scooted over towards him, sat next to him, and grabbed his hand and held his hand for the rest of the service. She saw a brother who was hurting. And that day, she was holding the hands of Jesus. And that day, that young man found God. Holy Wednesday. Jesus is in a storytelling mood. Jesus talks about being ready for Christ's return. And while we wait, be about your Father's business and invest your life in those the world considers the least. It's interesting, that's chapter 25 of Matthew. When you turn to Matthew 26, it says, when Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, as you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. May our churches, and Holy Week just kind of brings us back into focus. May our churches be a place where all are welcome, where we're about our Father's business, waiting for his return, investing our talents, and serving those who the world considers the least. For Jesus says, these are our brothers and sisters. Thanks for joining me. I hope you join me tomorrow for Holy Thursday.